Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigeria reels at the loss of life caused by a devastating tanker crash that then erupted into a bonfire. At least 147 people are killed in the disaster. Also, Kenya's number 2 is closer to a potential ousting. The Senate's begun impeachment hearings against Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Since taking office in 2022, he's fallen out with his boss and says the charges against him are trumped up. And a sneak peek. Flagship exhibition is set for a trial opening not far from the pyramids of Giza. The Grand Egyptian Museum will eventually display the world's largest archaeological collection. But first, 147 people have lost their lives in a devastating highway accident in Nigeria. A fuel tanker first overturned and then exploded just as crowds of people from the northern town of Majiya rushed in to try and recover some of the leaking petrol. The urgency with which they did so was likely exacerbated by national shortages caused by the country's worst economic crisis in a generation. Samuel Okoye tells us more.
Relief officials say more than 140 dead victims of the petrol tanker explosion were buried in a mass grave in Majiya village in Jigawa State, where the incident happened. The victims had to be given a mass burial because they were burnt beyond recognition. There are fears the death toll may rise as many of the injured victims sustained very serious burns. The victims, who include women and children, were scooping petrol that had spilled out from the tanker after it overturned. An explosion followed in the process.
No one in their right senses would go around scooping for hunger. When you travel around Nigeria, what you see is hunger. And when people get hunger, they get hungry, they get desperate. And I see desperation in the face of average Nigeria. People are hungry. There are people who are going to bed tonight without food. Now, when that person sees an opportunity to make money from scooping fuel, they will take that chance. I think we need to do better as a community. We need to do better as a nation. People cannot just continue to live a life of hunger. It's not fair on the human, and it's not fair on Nigerians.
The police said they tried to prevent the villagers from scooping the petrol, but they were overwhelmed by the large crowd. Oil explosions resulting in high casualties normally occur when Nigerians scoop petrol from ruptured oil pipelines or from petrol tankers involved in accidents, like in this case. The worst incident occurred in 1998 in Jesse village in the oil-producing Niger Delta region. More than 300 people scooping petrol from a ruptured oil pipeline were burnt to death following an explosion and a fire.
Well, the dramatic fallout from the shifting of political alliances in Kenya continues. The Senate's begun impeachment hearings that could lead to the landmark dismissal of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Now, he denies 11 charges, including corruption, undermining the government and stirring up ethnic hatred. He says that he's instead the victim of a witch hunt. Olivia Bizo tells us more.
The impeachment process against Kenya's Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua continues. The National Assembly voted last week in favour of the impeachment, paving the way for a 2-day trial in the Senate, which will determine his fate. Now, on multiple occasions, the Deputy President has tried to stop this process from continuing, but every time those attempts failed. On Wednesday morning, a court ruled that the impeachment process is constitutional, and a few hours later, the evidence was introduced to the Senate for hours of examination and then cross-examination. So why exactly is he being kicked out from office? Well, earlier I spoke to a political expert to better understand why.
It's a political process where the deputy president and his president and the leader of opposition don't agree. And they feel that he is the odd link, is the black sheep of this new coalition. And they want to kick him out and possibly bring in a more friendlier partner. So what they are calling evidence is simply looking for a reason to get him out, and dragging him through the parliament, the National Assembly in Kenya, is part of that political process.
So what will happen next? Well, on Thursday, the Senate will deal with the witnesses and evidence from Gashagua's side. They will then debate and finally vote. For the impeachment to be approved, at least 2/3 of the 67 senators need to approve the motion. If it does go ahead, then Gachagua will never be allowed to hold public office again.
Liv Bizot there for us. Now, Niger has bid adieu to the French names of several historic sites and streets in the capital and instead renamed them in honour of local icons. The symbolic change was not made quietly and was celebrated with marching bands and attended by several high-profile political figures this week. As the country continues to distance itself from former colonial power France, some of the renamed places include the former General Charles de Gaulle Avenue, now being christened Avenue Djibou Bakari. Now, Bakari was a key independence figure for Niger who died in 1998. And not far away, a memorial to those killed in the world wars has now been dedicated to all victims of colonization. Now, the EU's pledged a €30 million package to help Senegal rein in irregular migration from its shores. And that's on top of the €25 million grant earlier earmarked to support Senegal's push to grow the country's pharmaceutical sector. Now, this all feeds into President Bassirou Diomaye Faye's determination to triple per capita income by 2050, and days after he announced his roadmap for these ambitious development plans, and Senegalese are still discussing what to make of it. Our Caitlin Kelly tells us more.
A bold vision for Senegal's future is creating waves across the country. Just days after the government's unveiling of an ambitious development strategy, there is growing optimism about a new direction for the nation. As President Faye's administration released plans for a competitive economy aiming to reduce reliance on foreign debt by harnessing local resources.
A place has been reserved for quality human capital. This quality of human capital calls first and foremost on the young people we have today, who will be given the tools to move forward.
The path was already clear, but now it's mapped out and we have to take it. It's going to be a tough road, but it's the road to success and victory.
The plans aim to boost average income by nearly 50% while significantly reducing deficit and debt. The promise of bold reforms was key to President Faye's election victory in a nation struggling with high living costs and widespread unemployment. Some say the policies are overly ambitious, noting that the government will need to expand their tax base and secure greater financial backing from the private sector.
The real question is how to finance this program. We know that internally there's a lot of gloom and doom about the economy. The finance minister himself admitted that we could align ourselves with the IMF's guidelines by lifting targeted energy subsidies. The big risk, and this is my fear, is that the Senegalese people will finance this plan through austerity.
The plans come just 1 month ahead of parliamentary elections in Senegal, where President Bassirou Diomaye Faye will have to win a majority in the National Assembly to ensure he can improve what the government have called a catastrophic economic situation.
Now, for World Food Day, the World Food Programme warned that millions of people across southern Africa are facing their worst food crisis in decades. An unprecedented drought has forced a record 5 countries, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia and Zimbabwe, to declare a state of disaster. Sharon, our reporter, Sharon, brings us more from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare.
Today is a good day in Zimbabwe. The country has received its first rains after many months. This comes as a relief amid the worst drought in 4 decades. October 16 is World Food Day, but Zimbabwe's population is experiencing food insecurity. 7.6 million people, that's 50% of the population, are food insecure. Rural areas are the hardest hit. More than 90% of households in rural areas depend on agriculture for their livelihood, but erratic rainfall and poor harvest means many families are struggling to put food on the table. In urban areas, food insecurity is also on the rise because of rising food costs and soaring inflation. Drought has also hit hardest on Zimbabwe's economy. A fifth of the country's children are out of school. According to a UNICEF report, 580,000 children in Zimbabwe are living in severe food poverty. But there is hope. The government has started a school feeding program, providing free meals to children as a way to keep them in school.
Well, finally, a flagship exhibition is set for a trial opening not far from the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. The Grand Egyptian Museum will be opening 12 of its galleries to visitors this week at a site that will eventually display the world's largest archaeological collection. Matthew Mary Karashay tells us more.
While the majority of the galleries remain closed, a limited amount of visitors will be allowed to see parts of the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza starting Wednesday. The museum is launching a trial run to test crowd capacity until its as of yet unannounced official opening date.
The opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum sends an important message about recovering antiquities spread across the world. People used to say you only have warehouses, not museums, because the Egyptian Museum overcrowded its artifacts. Today, we're letting the world know that we can preserve tourism, Egyptian heritage and culture.
When completed, the Egyptian government hopes the museum will be one of the largest, most modern archaeological museums in the world. More than 100,000 of Egypt's ancient treasures will be on display, from the Old Kingdom period 4 millennia ago to the Greco-Roman period. Currently, visitors are limited to the grand staircase and a commercial area that showcase sarcophagi and statues. Regardless, they have been impressed.
So far, amazing. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of things that we are not aware of, especially coming from the other side of the world. And seeing everything here and learning from the locals has been great.
The Grand Egyptian Museum has been in construction for more than a decade at a cost of more than $1 billion. It was originally scheduled to be completed in 2013, but has faced multiple delays.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, though. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
Trust is our most precious asset. Every day, around the world, France 24, RFI and Monte Carlo Doualier join forces to bring you free, independent, verified, balanced information that fights manipulation, and in 21 languages. France Média Monde has been awarded the Journalism Trust Initiative Standard, which guarantees the professionalism and reliability of our international news media with a score of 100%. Trust is not automatic. It must be earned and cultivated. Thank you for your trust.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Once again, the only thing we want to know is, where are our children? They took them alive.
Ten years ago, 43 Mexican students brutally disappeared. Among them were young professors in training from the school of Ayotzinapa. Since then, their loved ones and students of the school have been keeping their memory alive. But when they try to understand who is behind this massacre, they come up against a wall of silence. They now have one hope: that Claudia Sheinbaum's new government will finally shed some light on this dark tragedy.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.